Even if we don't have a good president, having a strong opposition and having dedicated leaders who will be able to play the role of opposition was going to cushion Kenyans from so many things. So now, what we need to ask ourselves, which is very key, how comes that Kenyans don't see money? Can you imagine? Kenyans, you've had a lot of talk about the Kenyan public debt, where we have seen that William Ruto has borrowed over 3.5 trillion shillings in just 3 years of his presidency. And it's been discussed that he seems to be borrowing about 3.5 billion shillings a day. And people are asking many questions here, but let me tell you that let's tackle this thing in a different perspective. First of all, we have to answer the questions. Parliament should be oversighting borrowing to ensure borrowing is done in a certain way. How comes he has borrowed this much? So we have to understand the genesis of this. The first that happened is that when John Mbadi was member of Parliament, remember John Mbadi is an accountant, in the presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta, they drafted a bill, and the bill was passed in Parliament that takes away the powers of Parliament from oversighting the executive in terms of borrowing. Because before, for you to borrow, you had to borrow money according to Parliament oversight. Actually, it is Parliament that used to pass any borrowing that needed to be done by the executive. So once that was done, Parliament no longer have powers to actually stop the executive from borrowing money. So what's the consequence of that? First and foremost, it means that the president can borrow money anywhere, whenever, and wherever he wishes. He can actually go to Japan, come back with some billions of shillings. He can go to the US, he can go to World Bank, he can go to domestic borrowing and the rest. So that's what has been happening of late. Now, the second implication about that is that anytime they borrow money, that money does not come to the consolidated fund so that it can be spent from here. Why was coming all the money borrowed plus the taxes collected having to go to consolidated fund important? It's important that all the funds and money borrowed going to consolidated fund because it's only there that you can actually be able to oversight and how that money is being spent. So there are two oversights being lost here. One is that the president can borrow where, whenever, wherever, for whatever he wishes. The second one is that he can spend that money whichever way he wants. And that money do not have to come to Kenya. That's why you've heard that these people have opened foreign accounts. So you can go to the US, pick money, leave the money in Dubai, come to Kenya, then start forcing Kenya to pay back money they never saw. So it's like someone is hitting your chest to vomit bread, and you didn't eat bread. Someone is hitting your chest to vomit githeri, and you have never taken githeri, or you didn't take githeri that day. So that is the consequences. The last consequence is that the money does not go to development because according to the Kenyan Constitution and also the Public Finance Act, you should borrow money only for development, not for recurrent expenditure. But with that bill now, you can borrow anyway. So this brings us to two problems. Now, how to understand debt. Debt can be understood where you talk about debt ceiling. Debt ceiling is whereby a country puts a certain percentage, like in Kenya is 75%, that our debt to GDP should not be more than 75%. Now, if that policy is there, yet there's no way to enforce it through parliament, then it is completely useless. Remember before, Raila Odinga had been chairman of the Public Account Committee as the leader of opposition. Uhuru Kenyatta has been a leader of the Public Accounts Committee. Kibaki had been a leader of Public Accounts Committee because they were concerned about oversighting how government borrows. That's when opposition used to be strong. Now I'm hearing people saying opposition is useless without them being able to control the Public Account Office or Committee, which controls actually how money is borrowed, how that money is spent, how it can be oversighted. That's why even if we don't have a good president, having a strong opposition and having dedicated leaders who will be able to play the role of opposition was going to cushion Kenyans from so many things. So now, what we need to ask ourselves, which is very key, how comes that Kenyans don't see money? Can you imagine? We have a government that overborrows. We have a government that overtaxes. And we have a government also that, as they overtaxes, they don't pay pending bills. And that answers the question why Kenya don't see this money. Can you imagine that since Ruto became president, 3.5 trillion shillings should have been circulating in the economy, but you don't see that money. And let me also make it worse for you. That every financial year, as he borrows the 3.5 trillion, Kenya collects around 2.8 trillion shillings. Let's put this in days. Imagine every day Ruto borrows 3.5 billion. And then Kenya collects, in terms of revenue from KRA, 9.5 billion. You add that together, that's a total of 13 billion, which means that William Ruto has 13 billion at his disposal anytime he wants to use that money. How comes Kenya don't see this money? How come this money does not circulate to you? Yet this money is borrowed. How can we be spending 13 billion every day and no one sees? So, overborrowing, overtaxing, and not paying bills means that every Kenyan who provides their services, whether you are offering healthcare, which, for example, faith-based organization like Catholic Church Healthcare, SEK, or any other private person, any service you offer, you are not paid. Yet these things are budgeted for. So if you are not paid, you don't see the money. That's why the money is there, but you cannot get the money to you because they're spending bills. Pending wages and salaries. If you are working somewhere, this money has been borrowed or this tax has been collected, then you should be paid, but no one pays you. So what I'm trying to say here is that what is happening in Kenya is grossly incompetent government and also grossly corrupt government, because that's the only way to explain why you can't receive money. Because remember, all the pending bills, you cannot procure anything if it has not been done by a budget. So anybody who has not been paid, though they offered services, means that somebody else has remained with the money which you're supposed to be given. So that's why many Kenyans are committing suicide in county assemblies, in county government, national government, any business with government. That money was in the budget. In fact, every procurement begins by saying, we have set aside X amount of money to do this job. Talk to IEK, Institute of Engineers of Kenya. Talk to contractors of Kenya, all engineers in Kenya. Before a road is developed, there's a fund allocated in the budget. That's why we need a budget. We cannot read a budget, then we act as if there's no budget. That money had been allocated for. So capitation in schools, it had been put in the budget and passed in parliament. The capitation in education, the ones for NHIF, SHA, all that had been put in the budget. Now, what is happening is that instead of that money coming to you, that money goes to him or her. The him and her, you know them. I'm not here to name names. But even if I don't name names, you know them. That is the main problem why there's no money in circulation. So